The setting sun painted the sky in hues of amber and gold as Emma Wilson rocked her 6-month-old daughter, Lily, by the large bay window of their cottage. The Wilson family had moved to this remote woodland cabin just 3 months ago, seeking solace from the bustling city life. Their home stood at the edge of a dense forest, where the wilderness met civilization in a delicate, unspoken agreement. Emma gently placed Lily in her wooden crib near the window before heading to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The baby's curious eyes remained fixed on the world outside, where shadows grew longer as daylight faded. Lily cooed softly, her tiny fingers reaching toward the glass pane that separated her from the mysteries of the forest. Thunder rumbled in the distance, signaling an approaching storm. Emma's husband, Noah, had gone into town for supplies, promising to return before the weather worsened. The cottage creaked under the growing wind, its wooden beams protesting against nature's force. As Emma stirred the soup simmering on the stove, she heard a strange sound from the front porch. It wasn't the familiar crunch of Noah's boots on gravel, nor was it the casual visit of woodland creatures that occasionally ventured close to their home. This sound carried weight, intention, and something Emma couldn't quite place: desperation. Her heart pounded as she approached the window. The sight that greeted her made her blood run cold. A massive brown bear stood at their doorstep, its powerful frame hunched and tense. Emma's first instinct was to rush to Lily, but something in the bear's demeanor made her pause. The animal wasn't displaying aggression. Instead, it pawed gently at the ground, releasing soft, mournful sounds that seemed almost like pleas. Behind the mother bear, partially hidden in shadow, lay a small cub. Its fur was matted with blood, and its tiny body trembled with each labored breath. The cub's rear leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and fresh wounds suggested a violent encounter, perhaps with a larger predator or a human trap. The mother bear raised her head, looking directly toward the cottage window where baby Lily watched with innocent fascination. In that moment, Emma witnessed something she would never forget. Tears streaming down the bear's face, catching the last light of day as they fell. The mother bear's eyes held not the wildness of a forest creature, but the universal anguish of a parent whose child suffered. Emma remained frozen, torn between fear for her family and a growing sense that she was witnessing something extraordinary. The bear moaned again, nudging her injured cub with heartbreaking gentleness. Then, in a gesture that defied all natural law, the mother bear bowed her massive head toward the window where Lily sat, as if imploring the human child for mercy. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the scene in stark white light. In that brief, electric moment, Emma saw that Lily had pressed her tiny palm against the window glass, her innocent eyes meeting the bear's desperate gaze without fear. Something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species, language, and the ancient divide between humans and wild things. The storm clouds gathered overhead, promising to unleash their fury at any moment. Emma knew she faced an impossible choice. Noah was still miles away. The injured cub would not survive the night without help. And somehow her baby daughter seemed to understand what the adults around her might have forgotten, that suffering recognized no boundaries between creatures. Emma watched as Lily's face lit up with a smile directed at the bears outside their home. The baby babbled excitedly, her tiny hands reaching out as if to welcome these unexpected visitors. In that moment, Emma felt her fear begin to transform into something else entirely, a mixture of awe and strange determination. What happened in the hours that followed would forever change the Wilson family and shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about the natural world. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Who would she even call? The forest rangers would likely see the bears as a threat. Animal control might not arrive in time to save the cub, and Noah was still at least 40 minutes away, battling increasingly treacherous roads as the storm intensified. Another flash of lightning revealed the mother bear still waiting patiently, her massive body now soaked with rain. The injured cub had stopped moving, its small chest barely rising with each shallow breath. Time was running out. "This is insane," Emma whispered to herself as she put down the phone and moved toward the front door. Maternal instinct overcame rational thought, not just her instinct to protect Lily, but a deeper, more primal recognition of another mother's desperation. Emma gently closed the nursery door, leaving Lily safely in her crib. Then, with heart pounding wildly against her ribs, she cracked open the front door. The mother bear's scent, a mixture of wet fur, earth, and something distinctly wild, filled Emma's nostrils. She stood perfectly still, waiting for the animal's reaction. The bear made no aggressive move. Instead, it stepped backward, allowing Emma to see the cub more clearly. The young bear's wounds were worse than she had first thought. Its hind leg was not only broken, but caught in the steel jaws of a poacher's trap. A metal chain extended from the trap, suggesting the cub had dragged itself through the forest, desperate to escape. "Oh God," Emma breathed, horror and anger rising within her. Poaching was illegal in these woods. Someone had deliberately set this cruel device, never considering the suffering it would cause. The mother bear made a soft huffing sound, then did something extraordinary. She pushed the cub gently toward Emma with her nose, an unmistakable gesture of trust that defied all natural instinct. Thunder crashed directly overhead, and the skies opened. Rain poured down in torrents, drenching Emma within seconds as she knelt beside the injured cub. Up close, she could see the animal was barely more than a baby itself, perhaps only a few months old. "I'll help you," she promised, her voice barely audible over the storm. "But I need to get some supplies." As if understanding, the mother bear remained still, her eyes never leaving Emma as she retreated back into the house. Emma's mind raced as she gathered towels, a first aid kit, and a pair of heavy-duty garden shears from Noah's tool bench. She had basic veterinary knowledge from growing up on a farm, but treating a wild bear cub was far beyond her experience. When she returned to the porch, she found that the mother bear had moved the cub closer to the door, sheltering it from the worst of the rain. Emma worked quickly, wrapping towels around the cub to warm its trembling body. The trap was her biggest concern. Rusty and cruelly tight, it had cut deeply into the cub's leg, which had swollen to nearly twice its normal size. "This is going to hurt," Emma warned, though she knew the cub couldn't understand her words. She positioned the garden shears and began working on the trap's mechanism, searching for a weakness. The cub whimpered in pain, and instantly the mother bear let out a warning growl. Emma froze, suddenly very aware of how easily those massive jaws could crush her skull. For a terrifying moment she thought she had made a fatal mistake. A sound from inside the house broke the tension. Lily's high-pitched babbling, followed by delighted laughter. At the sound of the human baby, the mother bear's demeanor changed. Her growl subsided, and she turned her attention back to her suffering cub. Emma continued working on the trap with renewed determination. After several agonizing minutes, the metal jaws released with a loud snap. The cub cried out, then lay still, its breathing shallow but steady. Blood flowed freely from the wound, and Emma pressed clean towels against it to stem the bleeding. "We need to get him inside," she said, half to herself and half to the mother bear. "He needs warmth and proper care." What happened next would later be described by Emma as the most surreal moment of her life. The mother bear, after a moment's hesitation, nudged her cub toward the open door of the cottage. It was as if she understood that her baby's survival depended on trusting this human stranger. Emma gently lifted the cub, surprised by how light it felt in her arms. It weighed perhaps 30 pounds, heavy for a pet, but remarkably small for a creature that would one day grow to be hundreds of pounds of muscle and fur. The cub didn't resist. It had either accepted its fate or was too weak to fight. As Emma carried the injured cub into her home, she was acutely aware of the mother bear following close behind. She was allowing a wild predator, one of the forest's most dangerous inhabitants, to enter the same house where her baby daughter slept. By any rational measure, it was madness. Yet something deeper than reason guided her actions. The mother bear moved with surprising delicacy for such a large animal, her massive paws making little sound on the wooden floor. Her eyes darted around the unfamiliar human dwelling, nostrils flaring at the strange scents, but her focus remained on her cub. Emma laid the injured cub on a blanket near the fireplace and worked quickly to build a fire. The warmth would be essential for the young bear's recovery. As flames began to lick at the kindling, casting flickering shadows across the room, Emma cleaned the cub's wound with antiseptic solution and wrapped it in clean bandages. The mother bear watched every movement, her enormous body tense but restrained. She settled herself on the floor beside her cub, massive head resting on massive paws, eyes never leaving Emma. From the nursery came sounds of Lily awakening. Emma's maternal alarm bells rang. Her baby was just rooms away from wild bears. She hurried to check on her daughter, half expecting to hear the sounds of destruction as the bear took advantage of her absence. But when Emma returned with Lily in her arms, she found the scene unchanged. The mother bear remained by her cub, peaceful and watchful. Only her eyes moved, tracking the human mother and child as they entered the room. Lily, far from being frightened, squealed with delight at the sight of the bears. She wriggled in Emma's arms, clearly wanting a closer look at these fascinating visitors. "No, Lily," Emma whispered, keeping a safe distance. "They're not pets." But as the minutes stretched into an hour and the storm raged outside, a strange calm settled over the cottage. The injured cub slept fitfully by the fire, occasionally whimpering in pain but showing signs of improvement as warmth returned to its small body. The mother bear maintained her vigil, alert but non-threatening. Emma sat in a chair across the room, holding Lily and watching this impossible scenario unfold in her living room. The rational part of her brain kept screaming that she should be terrified, that she should call for help, that wild animals were unpredictable and dangerous. But another part, a deeper, more instinctive part, recognized something in the mother bear's eyes, a universal language of motherhood that transcended species. The cottage door burst open, startling everyone. Noah stood in the doorway, drenched from the storm, a bag of groceries in one hand. He froze at the threshold, eyes widening in horror at the scene before him. "Emma," he whispered, his voice tight with fear. "Don't move. There's a bear in our house." Before Emma could respond, the mother bear rose to her full height, an intimidating 7 feet of muscle, claws, and teeth. Noah dropped the groceries, reaching slowly for the hunting knife he kept on his belt. "Noah, don't!" Emma cried. "She's not going to hurt us. She needed help. Her cub was injured." But Noah had already drawn his knife, his face a mask of protective fury. The mother bear roared, a deafening sound that shook the windows and sent Lily into frightened tears. In that moment, everything Emma had worked to build, the fragile trust, the impossible peace, seemed about to shatter in violence and blood. "Noah, please," Emma begged, clutching Lily protectively against her chest. "Put the knife down. She came to us for help." Noah's eyes darted between his wife, his baby daughter, and the enormous predator standing between them. His knuckles whitened around the handle of his knife. "Have you lost your mind? That's a wild bear, Emma. It could kill us all in seconds." The mother bear's powerful muscles tensed, ready to defend her cub. Her lips pulled back, revealing yellowed teeth that could easily tear through flesh and bone. The injured cub, awakened by the commotion, let out a frightened whimper. What happened next would later become the subject of local legend. Lily, who had been crying in fear, suddenly stopped. She turned her tiny head toward the bears and extended her small hand. Then, to the astonishment of both her parents, she made a sound. Not her usual babbling, but a distinct, soft cooing that mimicked the injured cub's whimpers. The mother bear's attention shifted from Noah to the human baby. Her aggressive stance relaxed slightly, massive head tilting in what looked remarkably like curiosity. Noah remained frozen, knife poised, but uncertainty had crept into his expression. "Emma," he whispered, "what's happening?" Emma could only shake her head, equally mystified by their daughter's behavior and the bear's response to it. "I don't know, but please, Noah, trust me. If she wanted to hurt us, she would have done it long ago." As if to emphasize Emma's point, the mother bear lowered herself back to the floor beside her cub, though her eyes remained fixed on Noah and his knife. "I removed a trap from the cub's leg," Emma explained, her voice steadier now. "An illegal trap, Noah. Someone's poaching in these woods." Noah's expression shifted at the mention of poaching. He had grown up in these mountains and held a deep respect for the wildlife that inhabited them. Slowly, reluctantly, he returned the knife to its sheath. "You're telling me this bear came to our house, to our baby for help?" His voice was heavy with skepticism, but the evidence was right before his eyes. A wild mother bear, peacefully lying on their living room floor while her injured cub received care. "I know how it sounds," Emma admitted. "I can hardly believe it myself." The storm continued to rage outside, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling through the trees. The cottage creaked and groaned under nature's assault, but inside, an uneasy truce had formed. Noah cautiously moved to Emma's side, his body still positioned protectively between his family and the bears. "What's the plan here? We can't keep wild bears as house guests." "The cub needs rest and medical attention," Emma said. "Once the storm passes, maybe we can call Dr. Reynolds. He treats large animals on the Peterson farm." Noah ran a hand through his wet hair, clearly struggling to process the situation. "A country vet isn't exactly qualified to treat wild bears, Em. Do you have a better idea? If we call Forest Services, they might—" A sharp knock at the door interrupted her. All eyes, human and bear, turned toward the sound. "Hello? Anybody home?" A gruff voice called from outside. "Forest Ranger. Got reports of illegal trapping in the area, checking all cabins." The mother bear instantly rose to her feet again, her posture defensive. Noah moved to answer the door, but Emma grabbed his arm. "Wait," she whispered urgently. "Think about how this looks. Wild bears in our living room? The ranger might shoot them on sight." Noah hesitated, torn between civic duty and the bizarre sanctuary they had accidentally created. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. "I know someone's in there. I can see your lights," the ranger called. Noah made a split-second decision. He approached the door, but didn't open it. "Sorry for the delay. My family settled in for the night. The storm's pretty bad." "Just doing a routine check, sir," the ranger replied. "We've found several illegal traps in the area. Haven't seen any suspicious activity, have you?" Noah's eyes met Emma's across the room. Behind her, the mother bear stood protectively over her wounded cub, her massive frame tense with fear. "Actually," Noah said, choosing his words carefully, "I did find something strange while hiking yesterday. Looked like a camp about 2 miles north of here. Might be worth checking out." "Appreciate the tip," the ranger said. "Stay safe in this weather. I'll come back tomorrow if I need more information." They listened to the sound of boots crunching away on gravel, followed by a vehicle starting up and driving off. Only then did Noah release his breath. "That was close," Emma whispered. The mother bear, seemingly understanding the danger had passed, settled back down beside her cub. The young bear's breathing had improved, and its eyes followed the humans with more alertness than before. "I just lied to a forest ranger," Noah said, sounding dazed. "For bears." Despite the tension, Emma couldn't help but laugh. The situation was so absurd, so completely outside the realm of normal experience, that humor seemed the only rational response. Even Noah cracked a smile. "So, Dr. Reynolds?" "In the morning," Emma agreed, "if the cub makes it through the night." They made an awkward arrangement for the evening. The bears remained by the fireplace, while Noah fashioned a makeshift bed for himself, Emma, and Lily on the far side of the room. Neither parent was willing to leave their daughter alone in the nursery, not with wild predators in the house, no matter how docile they currently appeared. As the night deepened and the storm gradually subsided, Emma lay awake, watching the mother bear. The massive animal dozed fitfully, awakening at the slightest sound to check on her cub. Such devotion, such fierce protection. It was a mirror of Emma's own feelings for Lily. Sometime past midnight, Emma heard a soft whimpering. The injured cub was struggling to stand, its wounded leg trembling with the effort. The mother bear nudged it gently, encouraging but not forcing the attempt. Emma nudged Noah awake. "Look," she whispered. Together they watched as the cub took one tentative step, then another. The bandaged leg held, though clearly causing pain. The mother bear made a sound that could only be described as proud encouragement. "It's going to be okay," Noah said softly, and Emma wasn't sure if he was talking about the cub or their own bizarre situation. Dawn arrived with gentle fingers of light reaching through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean. Dew sparkled on grass and leaves, and birds resumed their morning songs. The cub was sleeping peacefully, its breathing strong and regular. The mother bear, however, was alert and restless. She paced between the cub and the front door, her meaning clear. It was time to leave. "She wants to go home," Emma said, cradling a still sleeping Lily. Noah nodded. "The cub seems stronger. Maybe that's best for everyone." Emma felt a strange reluctance to see the bears go. The night had been extraordinary. Frightening, yes, but also filled with a sense of connection she couldn't quite explain. Something profound had happened in their little cottage, something that defied the normal boundaries between human and wild. Noah carefully opened the front door. Outside, the forest beckoned with morning sunlight filtering through the trees. The mother bear approached her cub, gently nudging it awake. The young bear struggled to its feet, favoring the injured leg but able to stand. Emma felt tears stinging her eyes as she watched the cub take several experimental steps across the living room floor. "Good job, little one," she whispered. The mother bear turned toward Emma and Noah, her dark eyes inscrutable. Then she did something neither human expected. She approached them directly, without aggression or fear. Noah tensed, but Emma placed a restraining hand on his arm. The bear stopped just feet away from where they stood with Lily. She raised her massive head, meeting their eyes with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Then she lowered herself in what could only be described as a bow. "She's thanking us," Emma breathed, hardly believing the words even as she spoke them. Lily awoke at that moment, blinking sleepily at the scene before her. When she saw the mother bear, she broke into a delighted smile and reached out her small hands. The mother bear made a soft chuffing sound, then turned back to her cub. Together the bears moved slowly toward the open door and the waiting forest beyond. On the threshold, the mother bear paused one last time, looking back at the human family with eyes that seemed to hold a message none of them could fully comprehend. Then, with surprising grace for such a large creature, she led her cub away from the cottage and into the trees. Noah put his arm around Emma's shoulders as they watched the bears disappear into the forest that was their true home. Lily babbled happily in Emma's arms, unaware of how extraordinary the night had been. "No one's ever going to believe this," Noah said, shaking his head in wonderment. Emma leaned against him, feeling exhausted, yet somehow transformed by the experience. "I'm not sure I believe it myself." What neither of them saw, but would discover in the coming days, was that the mother bear had left something behind. A perfect paw print in the soft mud beside their porch steps. A mark that seemed to say, "I was here, I remember, and I am grateful." The story of that stormy night would be told and retold in the Wilson family for generations to come. A story about a barrier crossed, an impossible understanding reached. A story about two mothers from different worlds, united by the most fundamental instinct of all, the drive to protect their young, no matter the cost. And though many would doubt, calling it a fanciful tale born of isolation and imagination, the Wilsons would always know the truth. They had witnessed something rare and precious, a moment when the divide between human and wild was bridged by compassion. 3 weeks later, Emma sat on the porch swing with Lily in her lap, enjoying the warm afternoon sunshine. Noah had gone into town for supplies, a routine errand that no longer carried the weight of anxiety it once had. Life had largely returned to normal after that extraordinary night, though Emma found herself watching the forest edge more carefully, wondering about the bears they had helped. Dr. Reynolds had been skeptical when they called him the next morning with a carefully constructed story about finding an injured fox. His examination of the empty trap and the bloodied bandages had raised his eyebrows, but he had asked no further questions. Some things were better left unspoken in these mountains. "Do you think we'll ever see them again?" Emma had asked Noah several nights after the incident. "For their sake, I hope not," Noah had replied. "Wild animals should stay wild." Emma knew he was right, but she couldn't help feeling a connection to the mother bear, a bond formed in that strange, storm-filled night when two very different mothers had recognized something in each other. A rustling at the forest edge caught Emma's attention now. She instinctively held Lily closer, scanning the tree line with alert eyes. The branches parted, and Emma's breath caught in her throat. The mother bear emerged from the woods, standing tall at the edge of the clearing. She was alone this time, her cub nowhere in sight. For a long moment, bear and woman regarded each other across the open space, wild and domestic, separated by an ancient divide yet connected by a night neither would forget. Lily squealed with delight, recognizing the bear despite the weeks that had passed. She waved her tiny hands, and to Emma's astonishment, the mother bear raised one massive paw in what could almost be interpreted as a wave in return. Then, with deliberate movement, the bear lowered something from her mouth onto the ground. Even from a distance, Emma could see it was a freshly killed rabbit, an offering left at the boundary between forest and home. "Thank you," Emma called softly, though she knew the bear couldn't understand her words. The mother bear held Emma's gaze for one more moment, then turned and disappeared back into the forest, leaving only disturbed branches and the gift of food as evidence she had been there at all. Emma didn't mention the bear's return to Noah that evening. Some experiences were too personal, too profound to share, even with those we love most. Instead, she held the memory close, a secret connection to the wild that had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. Summer faded into autumn, and autumn gave way to winter. Snow blanketed the forest and the clearing around the cottage, transforming their world into a pristine, white wonderland. Lily grew stronger each day, learning to crawl and babble with increasing complexity. Sometimes, when she played near the windows facing the forest, she would stop and stare into the trees with unusual focus, as if seeing something her parents could not. One snowy December evening, as the family sat by the fire, a familiar sound drew them to the window. A deep, rumbling call that wasn't quite a roar. There, at the edge of their snow-covered yard, stood not just the mother bear but her cub as well. The young bear had grown considerably, its injured leg showing barely a limp as it bounded playfully in the snow. "She wanted us to see," Emma whispered, tears filling her eyes. "She wanted us to know he's okay." Noah put his arm around her shoulders, his earlier skepticism softened by the undeniable evidence before them. Maybe there's more to these creatures than we understand. The bears remained for only a few minutes before returning to the forest. They didn't approach the house, didn't cross the invisible boundary that separated their world from the humans. But their message had been delivered, a connection acknowledged, a gratitude expressed in the only way they could. As winter deepened, bringing with it long nights and the peaceful isolation of heavy snowfall, Emma often found herself thinking about the mother bear. Was she hibernating now, curled protectively around her cub in some hidden den? Would she remember the humans who had helped her when spring came again? Life in the mountains had its hardships, the isolation, the harsh weather, the distance from conveniences that most people took for granted. But it also offered gifts that few would ever experience, the raw beauty of untamed nature, the rhythm of seasons unmediated by city lights and concrete, and sometimes, if you were very lucky, a glimpse into the heart of the wild that would change you forever. Years would pass. Lily would grow from a curious baby into a thoughtful child with an unusual affinity for animals. The Wilsons would add to their family, a son named Ethan, born during a summer thunderstorm that reminded Emma powerfully of that fateful night. And though they would never again share their home with wild bears, the family maintained a respectful distance with the forest creatures, neither fearing nor intruding upon their natural existence. On Lily's 5th birthday, she received a special gift from Noah, a small wooden carving of a mother bear and cub. Emma questioned him with her eyes, and he shrugged, a private smile passing between them. "The story's part of her, whether she remembers it or not," he said softly. Lily ran her small fingers over the carving with unusual reverence. "I know them," she said simply, surprising both her parents. "You do?" Emma asked carefully. Lily nodded, her eyes serious beyond her years. "They visit me in my dreams. The mama bear tells me stories about the forest." Emma and Noah exchanged glances, uncertain how to respond to this revelation. "What kind of stories?" Noah finally asked. "About how all mothers are the same, even when they look different," Lily replied, her voice carrying the simple certainty of childhood. "And about how helping others is the most important thing we can do." That night, after the children were asleep, Emma stood on the porch gazing at the forest that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. Somewhere in those dark depths, a mother bear might be teaching her growing cub the ways of the wild. And perhaps, in her own bear way, she was also teaching him about the night when fear was overcome by something stronger, the universal instinct to protect the innocent and vulnerable, regardless of species. The locals in the nearby town eventually named the mother bear Grace, after several sightings confirmed she was unusually tolerant of human presence. Unlike other bears that raided garbage cans or showed aggression when surprised, Grace would simply watch humans from a distance, her intelligent eyes seeming to evaluate rather than fear. Wildlife photographers captured images of her with her growing cub, and later, with new cubs from subsequent years. A local conservation group used her story, or the parts of it known to the public, to campaign against illegal trapping in the national forest. Only the Wilsons knew the full truth. Only they understood the depth of connection that had formed on that stormy night when a mother bear had sought help from a human baby, and somehow, miraculously, received it. As Emma turned to go back inside, a distant call echoed through the trees. The distinctive sound of a bear, neither threatening nor afraid, but like a greeting carried on the night wind. Emma smiled and raised her hand in acknowledgement, though she knew she couldn't be seen. "Good night, Grace," she whispered. "Keep your cubs safe." The wind seemed to carry her words away into the vast darkness of the forest, where perhaps, just perhaps, they reached the ears they were meant for. A reminder that some bonds, once formed, can never truly be broken. And though their worlds would remain largely separate, as nature intended, that moment of connection had left its mark on both. A reminder that compassion knows no boundaries, that motherhood is a language understood across species, and that sometimes the most profound understanding comes not from words, but from the simple, powerful act of helping another in need. 10 years passed, transforming both the Wilson family and the forest around them. Lily had grown into a thoughtful 15-year-old with an uncanny ability to understand animals. Her younger brother Ethan, now 9, had inherited his father's practical nature, but his sister's compassion. The cottage had expanded with the family, a new wing added to accommodate their growing needs, though Emma had insisted on preserving the original living room exactly as it had been on that fateful night. The forest, too, had changed. A severe wildfire 3 summers ago had devastated the western portion, leaving behind a stark landscape of blackened trunks and new undergrowth struggling to reclaim the land. Conservation efforts had intensified, with stricter regulations against poaching and illegal trapping. Grace, the mother bear, had become something of a local legend, mentioned in tourist brochures, and featured in a documentary about wildlife adaptation to human encroachment. Emma, now in her early 40s, had channeled her experience into action, founding a wildlife rehabilitation center on the edge of their property. With proper permits and training, she worked primarily with smaller animals, foxes, raccoons, and the occasional fawn, but her ultimate goal was always to return them to their natural habitat. Noah supported her endeavors, though he maintained a healthy skepticism about the extent to which humans should interfere with wild creatures. "Remember, they don't think like we do," he would caution when Emma or Lily grew too attached to a rehabilitation case. "The kindest thing we can do is help them return to their own world." On a crisp autumn morning, Emma stood at the kitchen window, watching golden leaves spiral down from the maple trees. Lily had left for school, and Noah had taken Ethan into town for supplies. The rehabilitation center was temporarily empty, all their recent patients successfully released back into the wild. The quiet felt both peaceful and somehow expectant, as if the world were holding its breath. The phone rang, shattering the silence. Emma answered to find Marcus Reynolds on the line, the son of the original Dr. Reynolds, who had taken over his father's veterinary practice 5 years ago. "Emma, we've got a situation," he said without preamble. "Forest Services found an injured bear cub near Blackwater Creek. Female, about 8 months old, caught in some kind of trap. They're bringing her to you." Emma's heart quickened. In 10 years of wildlife rehabilitation, she had never taken in a bear. It was beyond her permit restrictions and facility capabilities. "Marcus, I can't." "They know that," he interrupted. "But they also know about Grace. The Rangers think this might be one of her cubs." Emma gripped the phone tighter. "How can they be sure?" "The markings match, and it's in her known territory. But there's something else, Emma." Marcus paused. "The mother bear was shot. Poachers, most likely. She didn't make it." A cold weight settled in Emma's chest. Grace, the intelligent, gentle bear, who had trusted humans enough to seek their help, killed by the very species she had reason to trust. The irony was both painful and infuriating. "The cub?" Emma managed to ask. "Alive, but in bad shape. Forest Services would typically send her to the State Wildlife Facility in Garfield, but that's a 3-hour drive. They don't think she'll survive the trip." Emma closed her eyes, memories flooding back of that stormy night a decade ago. A mother bear's pleading eyes, a tiny cub's whimpers, the impossible trust that had formed between species. "Bring her here," she said firmly. "I'll figure something out." Within the hour, a Forest Service truck rumbled up the long driveway to the cottage. 2 rangers carefully unloaded a large crate, its sides marked with warning labels and ventilation holes. Emma directed them to the Rehabilitation Center's isolation room, a space designed for contagious cases, with reinforced walls and a locking door. When they opened the crate, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The bear cub was smaller than she expected, painfully thin beneath her dark fur. Her right front paw was mangled in a trap similar to the one Emma had removed from Grace's cub a decade earlier. But it was the eyes that struck Emma most forcefully. Dark, intelligent, and filled with the same mixture of fear and desperate hope she had seen in Grace's eyes. "We've given her a sedative for transport," explained Ranger Patterson, an older man with weather-beaten features. "It should wear off in an hour or so after that." He shrugged. "Bears aren't easy patients." Emma nodded, her mind already racing through the logistics. She would need to contact the State Wildlife Authority for emergency permission. They would need specialized equipment, possibly a veterinarian trained in large predator care. "Do you have any idea who killed the mother?" she asked as the Rangers prepared to leave. Patterson's expression darkened. "We found shell casings nearby, high-caliber hunting rifle, out of season, in a protected area. Definitely poachers. We're investigating, but—" He let the sentence hang unfinished. They both knew the chances of catching the perpetrators were slim. After the Rangers left, Emma approached the sedated cub cautiously. The trap had been removed by Forest Services, but the paw was badly mangled. Bones exposed, tissue inflamed. Without proper care, infection would set in quickly. Without her mother's protection and guidance, the cub's chances of survival in the wild were virtually non-existent. Emma pulled out her phone to call Noah, then hesitated. What would she tell him? That she had accepted a bear cub into their rehabilitation center without permission? That she felt a personal obligation to save Grace's offspring? Before she could decide, a soft sound from the doorway made her turn. Lily stood there, her school backpack still slung over one shoulder, her eyes fixed on the injured cub. "I felt it," Lily said simply. "I knew something was wrong, so I came home." Emma had long since stopped questioning her daughter's unusual intuition when it came to animals, particularly bears. Too many coincidences had piled up over the years. Lily knowing when Grace was nearby before anyone had spotted her, Lily dreaming about bear cubs the night before Grace was seen with new offspring. "It's Grace's daughter," Emma explained softly. "Grace is gone, Lily." Poachers. Lily's face crumpled momentarily, genuine grief washing over her features before hardening into determination. "Then we have to save her cub. We owe Grace that much." Emma should have sent Lily back to school, should have waited for Noah's practical input, should have consulted with wildlife authorities before making promises. Instead, she nodded. "We'll try." The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Lily helped Emma prepare the isolation room, making it as comfortable and secure as possible for their unusual patient. They lined the floor with straw and blankets, prepared bowls of fresh water, and assembled what medical supplies they might need. When Noah returned with Ethan, he took one look at the bear cub and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Emma recognized as his response to situations beyond his control. "You can't save every wild thing, Emma," he said quietly, but there was resignation rather than anger in his voice. He had known, perhaps from that first night, that the bears would always be a part of their lives in one way or another. "Just this one," Emma replied, "for Grace." As the sedative wore off, the cub became more alert and increasingly distressed. She paced the small room, whimpering for her mother, testing the strange surroundings with growing agitation. When Emma attempted to approach with antiseptic for the wounded paw, the cub retreated to a corner, baring tiny teeth in warning. "She's scared," Lily said unnecessarily, watching through the viewing window. "She doesn't understand that we're trying to help." Night fell, bringing with it memories of that stormy evening 10 years before. The parallels were not lost on Emma. Another injured bear cub, another impossible situation, another moment when the boundary between human and wild seemed both impassable and somehow irrelevant. The cub refused food and water, growing weaker as the hours passed. Her wounded paw needed treatment, but any attempt to approach resulted in fearful aggression. By midnight, Emma was beginning to lose hope. Without her mother's trust to bridge the gap, this cub saw humans only as threats. It was Lily who suggested the unorthodox solution. "Let me try," she said, sitting up in bed where Emma had finally convinced her to get some rest. "I think I can reach her." "Absolutely not," Noah interjected firmly. "A wounded bear is unpredictable, even a cub." But Lily's expression held the same determination Emma had seen in her own reflection countless times. "She's dying, Dad, we all know it. If we do nothing, she dies for sure. At least, let me try." Emma and Noah exchanged a long look, years of shared parenting and compromise flowing between them. Finally, Noah nodded, though his jaw remained tight with concern. "I'm coming with you," he said, "and at the first sign of danger, we're out." The rehabilitation center was quiet and dark as they made their way to the isolation room. The cub had retreated to the furthest corner, her small body curled around her injured paw, eyes gleaming in the dim light. Her breathing was labored, her once glossy fur now dull with pain and fear. Lily approached the door, her movements slow and deliberate. "I need to go in alone," she said quietly. "Lily," Noah began, but Emma placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Let her try," she whispered. Something about Lily's calm certainty reminded Emma of that night long ago, when a baby's innocent trust had somehow bridged an impossible divide. Lily entered the room cautiously, closing the door behind her. Through the viewing window, Emma and Noah watched with bated breath as their daughter sat cross-legged on the floor, several feet away from the injured cub. And then Lily began to speak. Not in words exactly, but in a series of soft sounds that mimicked a bear's vocalizations. Low, rumbling calls interspersed with gentle huffs and chuffs, a language Emma had heard only from Grace and her cubs over the years. The young bear's head lifted, ears swiveling toward the strange human-making bear sounds. For several tense minutes, nothing changed. The cub remained wary. Lily continued her unusual communication, and Emma and Noah watched in anxious silence. Then, slowly, the cub uncurled from her defensive position. She lifted her nose, scenting the air. Lily remained perfectly still, continuing her gentle vocalizations. With painful slowness, the cub took one halting step forward, then another, her injured paw held gingerly above the ground. Emma hardly dared breathe as the wounded animal approached her daughter. Noah's hand found hers, gripping it tightly as they witnessed something neither could fully comprehend. When the cub was just a foot away from Lily, she stopped, swaying slightly from weakness and pain. Lily slowly, carefully extended her hand, palm up, not reaching toward the bear, but offering connection on the cub's terms. The young bear stretched her neck forward, sniffing Lily's fingers. Then, in a moment that would remain etched in Emma's memory forever, the cub pressed her muzzle into Lily's palm. "Oh my God," Noah whispered beside her. How was she doing that? Emma could only shake her head, tears blurring her vision. "I don't know, but I think she's been preparing for this her whole life." Within the isolation room, a remarkable scene unfolded. The bear cub, having accepted Lily's presence, allowed the girl to examine her wounded paw. Lily's movements were gentle but confident, as if she had treated injured bears 100 times before. She spoke continuously in that strange mixture of human words and bear-like sounds, maintaining a connection that seemed to transcend ordinary understanding. When Lily finally emerged from the room an hour later, her clothes were filthy, and her face streaked with tears, but her eyes shone with quiet triumph. "She let me clean and wrap her paw," she reported, "and she drank some water. I think she's going to be okay." Over the following days, the bear cub, whom Lily named Hope, began a slow recovery. She accepted food and water from Lily's hand, allowed her wounds to be treated, and gradually extended her trust to Emma as well, though she remained wary of Noah and Ethan. As news spread of Grace's death and her orphaned cub, public outrage fueled the investigation. 2 weeks after Hope arrived at the Wilsons' Rehabilitation Center, forest rangers arrested 3 men for poaching in the protected area and for the killing of Grace, who had become something of a local celebrity. The question of Hope's future, however, remained unresolved. At 8 months old, she was too young to survive in the wild alone, yet too old to be easily integrated into captive bear populations. The State Wildlife Authority recommended transferring her to a permanent sanctuary once she was stable enough to travel. Lily was devastated by the prospect. "She belongs here," she insisted, "in Grace's territory, with us to help her until she's ready." The discussion became moot one crisp morning in late October. Emma entered the rehabilitation center to find Hope's enclosure empty, the specially reinforced door somehow unlatched. Panic seized her until she noticed the back door standing open as well, and Lily's boots missing from their usual place. Emma found them at the edge of the forest, her 15-year-old daughter and the half-grown bear cub standing together in the golden morning light. Lily was speaking softly, her hand resting gently on Hope's thick fur. As Emma watched, Lily removed the bandage from the bear's healing paw, then stepped back. Hope looked at Lily for a long moment, dark eyes holding an intelligence that seemed almost human. Then she turned and took several tentative steps into the forest. At the tree line, she paused, looking back at the humans who had saved her life. "Go on," Lily called softly. "Your family is waiting." As if in response to her words, a large male bear emerged from the trees, one Emma recognized from Grace's last litter, now fully grown. He approached Hope cautiously, sniffing her, communicating in ways humans could never fully understand. After a moment, he turned and moved deeper into the forest. Hope followed, limping slightly but moving with growing confidence. At the last moment before they disappeared from view, Hope turned again, raising her healing paw in what could only be described as a farewell gesture. Lily stood watching long after the bears had vanished among the trees. When Emma finally approached, she found her daughter's face wet with tears, but peaceful. "You knew this would happen," Emma said, not a question, but a realization. Lily nodded. "I've been dreaming about it for days." Her brother came to find her. Grace sent him. Emma put an arm around her daughter's shoulders, not questioning the impossible knowledge Lily somehow possessed. After all they had experienced, who was she to say what connections might exist between a girl who had once touched a mother bear's soul and the descendants of that remarkable animal? "Will she survive out there?" Emma asked. Lily smiled, a smile that held wisdom far beyond her 15 years. "She's not alone anymore. That's what Grace wanted us to understand all those years ago. None of us has to be alone, even when the world seems darkest." As they walked back to the cottage together, Emma reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun on that stormy night a decade earlier. A mother bear's desperate plea for help had rippled outward, changing not just the Wilsons but the entire community's relationship with the wilderness around them. Grace's legacy lived on, in stricter protections for the forest, in Emma's rehabilitation work, in Lily's remarkable connection to the wild, and now in Hope's return to the world where she truly belonged. That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Noah raised his glass in a toast. "To Grace," he said simply, "who taught us that sometimes the most important boundaries are the ones we choose to cross?" The forest outside their window held its secrets, as it always had. But now it also held something else, a story of trust and reciprocity, passed down through generations of both humans and bears. A reminder that compassion, once offered freely, creates ripples that extend far beyond a single act of kindness. And deep in the woods, where human footsteps rarely ventured, a young bear with a slightly crooked paw followed her older brother to a den that smelled faintly of her mother. There, safe among family she hadn't known existed, Hope curled up to sleep in the gathering darkness, her dreams filled with the gentle voice of a human girl who had somehow spoken her language. Some bonds, once formed, can never truly be broken, not by time or distance, not by differences in form or language, not even by death. They remain invisible threads connecting all living things in ways that logic cannot explain, but the heart somehow understands. And in that understanding lies the most profound truth of all, that in this vast, complex world, the simplest acts of kindness may well be the most powerful force of all. 5 years later, Lily stood at the edge of the forest on the morning of her 20th birthday. College acceptance letters waited for her back at the cottage, prestigious universities offering opportunities in wildlife biology and conservation. Her future stretched before her, bright with promise and purpose born from that fateful night 15 years ago. The forest had changed over the years, as forests do. New trees grew where old ones had fallen. Wildlife populations ebbed and flowed with the natural rhythms of predator and prey. But something remained constant, the invisible thread that connected the Wilson family to the bears that shared their mountain. Lily closed her eyes, feeling the early spring breeze against her face. When she opened them again, she wasn't surprised to see a bear watching her from between the trees. A female, with a distinctive limp in her right front paw. "Hello, Hope," Lily said softly. "I knew you'd come today." The bear approached with cautious grace, now fully grown and magnificent in her wild beauty. Behind her, 2 small cubs tumbled and played, their dark fur gleaming in the dappled sunlight. Hope stopped a respectful distance away, meeting Lily's gaze with the same intelligent awareness that had marked her mother and grandmother before her. Lily smiled, tears gathering in her eyes. "You have a family of your own now," she whispered. "Grace would be so proud." For years, Lily had carried a small leather pouch containing a lock of fur from Grace, saved by Emma after that night long ago. Now, she removed it from her pocket and knelt to place it gently on the ground between them. "I'm leaving soon," she told Hope. "Going to learn how to help more animals like you and your mother. But I wanted you to have this first." Hope approached the small offering, sniffing it carefully. Something flickered in her dark eyes, recognition, perhaps, of a scent that lived only in the deepest memories of her infancy. She looked up at Lily, and for a brief moment, the barrier between human and wild seemed to dissolve completely. Then Hope did something remarkable. She turned and called softly to her cubs, who approached cautiously, their curiosity overcoming their instinctive wariness. Under their mother's watchful eye, they investigated Lily with innocent interest, one bold enough to sniff her outstretched hand. "Emma! Lily!" Noah's voice called from the direction of the cottage. "Everyone's arriving for the party." Hope gathered her cubs with a gentle huff, preparing to retreat into the safety of the forest. But before she left, she paused, looking back at Lily one last time. In that moment, Lily understood what her mother had tried to explain all those years ago, that some connections transcend the boundaries we create between species, between wild and tame, between one generation and the next. That compassion, once given, creates an unbreakable bond that extends forward in ways we might never fully comprehend. "Thank you," Lily whispered, not just to Hope, but to Grace, to that stormy night, to all the moments that had shaped her life and her purpose. Hope raised her once-injured paw slightly, then turned and led her cubs deeper into the forest. Not in fear, but simply returning to the world where they belonged, carrying with them the legacy of trust that had begun with a desperate mother's plea and a human family's choice to help. As Lily walked back to the cottage where family and friends waited to celebrate her passage into adulthood, she felt a profound sense of completion. The story that had begun in fear and uncertainty had transformed into one of understanding and harmony. Not perfect, not without struggle, but genuine and enduring. Emma met her at the edge of the yard, recognition dawning in her eyes as she saw the empty pouch in Lily's hand. "You saw her?" Lily nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Emma wrapped her arms around her daughter, both of them understanding what needed no words. "Your father and I always wondered," she said finally, "if helping Grace that night was the right thing to do, if we were interfering where we shouldn't." "It was exactly right," Lily said with quiet certainty. "Not just for Grace or for Hope, but for all of us, for what it taught us about who we can be." From the cottage came the sounds of laughter and celebration, human voices full of joy and connection. From the forest behind them came the distant, rumbling call of a mother bear, guiding her cubs through the wilderness that was their birthright. Two families, two worlds, connected by a single act of compassion that had rippled outward through time, changing everything it touched. As Lily and Emma walked arm in arm toward the waiting celebration, the setting sun painted the sky in the same amber and gold hues that had graced that extraordinary evening 15 years before. The forest and the cottage, the wild and the human, existed side by side in a harmony born not from dominance but from respect, not from fear but from understanding. And in that delicate balance lay the truest answer to the question that had begun their journey. What happens when we choose compassion over fear, connection over separation, love over indifference? Everything. Everything happens. The impossible becomes possible. Barriers fall, hearts open, and the world, for a brief, shining moment, becomes whole again.